Single again. I posted those two words at 11:47 p.m., expecting my wife to call me within seconds. Instead, her reply appeared beneath the post before I could even lock my phone. Try again, husband. I stared at those three words. Then another message appeared. You forgot one thing. You're still wearing my wedding ring. For the first time that night, I laughed. Not because the prank had failed, because somewhere deep inside, I had been afraid it would succeed. I looked down at my left hand. The ring was still there, warm from my skin. Our marriage had lasted 6 years. 6 years of me being the man behind the woman everyone knew. My wife, Vivian Hart, was the CEO of Hartwell Technologies, a company she had built from a small software firm into a national technology group. People called her brilliant, fearless, untouchable. At business conferences, executives stood when she entered the room. At home, she still left her coffee mug beside the sink and forgot where she had put her glasses. And somehow, I had fallen in love with both women. The CEO and the woman who fell asleep while watching documentaries. I had always been proud of her. That was the part nobody understood. When people whispered that I was Vivian Hart's husband, I never felt embarrassed. I felt lucky. Until the last year. Something had changed. Vivian had become distant. At first, I blamed work. Then came Adrian Cole, her newly appointed Chief Strategy Officer. Adrian was handsome, confident, and exactly the kind of man business magazines liked putting beside powerful women. He and Vivian started working late together, then traveling together, then appearing in photographs together. I told myself it was nothing. I had told myself that 100 times. One evening, I waited outside the office with dinner because Vivian had promised we'd celebrate our anniversary. I watched her walk out with Adrian. They were laughing. She didn't see me. Adrian handed her his coat. Vivian accepted it. Something inside me tightened. When she finally noticed me, her smile disappeared. Daniel, what are you doing here? I thought we were having dinner. Her eyes flicked toward Adrian. Oh, just one word. No apology. No surprise. Just annoyance. I forgot, she said. Adrian smiled politely. I'll see you tomorrow, Vivian. She nodded. I watched him leave. Then I asked quietly, are you two together? Vivian's expression hardened. Seriously? I asked a question, and I don't appreciate being interrogated outside my office. I waited 2 hours. I didn't ask you to. That sentence stayed with me. For years, I'd been the person who remembered her meetings, brought her medicine when she was sick, reviewed presentations at midnight, and made sure her father never had to hear about the arguments we had. But suddenly, none of that seemed to count. I nodded. Okay. She looked surprised. Maybe she expected an argument. Instead, I turned around. That was the first time I walked away without trying to fix something. 3 weeks later, the real blow came. I discovered Vivian had signed an agreement with Adrian for a new subsidiary. A subsidiary built around an invention I'd spent 4 years developing. My invention. The algorithm had started as a personal project. I had never patented it because Vivian had once told me, if we're going to build something together, we'll do it properly. So I trusted her. I gave her access. She gave the project to Adrian. When I confronted her, she didn't even look guilty. Daniel, it's business. You used my work. Our marriage doesn't make you an owner of the company. I never said it did. Then stop acting betrayed. I stared at her. That hurt more than the agreement. Not because she had taken the work, because she knew exactly what it meant to me. That night, I packed nothing. I simply moved into the guest room. Vivian didn't come after me. For the next 2 weeks, we lived in the same house like strangers. I stopped asking where she was. Stopped checking whether she had eaten. Stopped waiting up. Stopped saying goodnight. And strangely, the quieter I became, the more peaceful I felt. Then came the final insult. Vivian announced at a company gala that Adrian would lead the subsidiary. The room erupted in applause. I stood at the back. She looked across the ballroom and saw me. For 1 second, something flickered in her eyes. Then she looked away. I realized something that night. She wasn't choosing Adrian over me. She was choosing a life in which I had become unnecessary. So I decided to give her exactly what she wanted. Freedom. But before I left, I did one foolish thing. I posted the prank. Single again. I expected Vivian to be angry. Instead, she replied, try again, husband. Then my phone rang. I answered. Daniel, she said calmly. Yes. Come home. I closed my eyes. I am home. No, she said. You're in the guest room. A pause. Come upstairs. I almost laughed. After everything, she still sounded like the CEO giving an employee an instruction. I don't think that's a good idea. Why? Because I think I'm finally done pretending everything is fine. Silence. Then Vivian asked softly, "Is this about Adrian?" I looked at the ring on my finger. No. Her voice changed. Then what is it about? I stared at the suitcase hidden beneath my bed. Me. The next morning, Vivian acted as if nothing had happened. That was somehow worse than anger. She sat at the kitchen island in a gray suit, reading reports on her tablet. I made coffee. She didn't look up. "You're still wearing the ring." I glanced at my hand. "Yes. You're also still my husband. For now." Her fingers stopped moving. For the first time, she looked directly at me. "What does that mean?" "It means I haven't decided what happens next." She put down the tablet. "Daniel, if you're trying to punish me." "I'm not." "Then what are you doing?" "Leaving." Her expression froze. I expected questions. Instead, she gave a small, almost disbelieving smile. "You'll be back." That sentence followed me all the way to the airport. Because 6 years ago, I had promised Vivian something. It happened during our first year together. We had been sitting on the hood of my old car outside a 24-hour diner. She was still running her first company then. 3 employees. 1 broken printer. A dream too large for the bank account she had. She had asked me, "What happens if I fail?" I told her. "Then we start again." She laughed. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't." "Then why stay?" I remember looking at her and saying, "Because I chose you before you became successful." She had kissed me that night. I remembered that kiss as I watched the city disappear beneath the airplane. I didn't cry. I thought I would. Instead, I felt strangely empty. My destination was a small coastal city 3 hours away from the capital. Nobody there knew Vivian Hart. Nobody cared that I was her husband. That was exactly what I needed. I rented a tiny apartment above an old bookstore. My landlord, Mrs. Ellis, was a 70-year-old woman who asked only one question. "What do you do?" I hesitated. "I used to design software." "Used to?" "I don't know yet." She shrugged. "Then figure it out." That became the first honest advice I'd received in months. I started working again. Not for Vivian. Not for Hartwell. For myself. I pulled out old notebooks and rebuilt the algorithm from memory. The first version crashed 27 times. The second lasted 11 minutes. The third ran overnight. When I woke up the next morning, the system was still running. I stared at the screen. For the first time in a year, I smiled. Then I remembered Vivian. I almost shut the laptop. Instead, I kept working. Weeks passed. I sold nothing. I barely slept. I made mistakes. I ran out of money. I considered giving up more than once. But every failure felt different now. Nobody was telling me I was unnecessary. Nobody was taking credit. Nobody was asking me to stand behind someone else's success. I was finally building something that belonged to me. Back in the capital, Vivian seemed convinced I would return. She called twice the first week. I didn't answer. The third call came at 2:13 a.m. I listened to the voicemail. "Daniel, this is ridiculous. Come home." The fourth said, "We need to talk." The fifth was only silence. I never called back. Then, 2 months after I left, something happened that changed everything. A venture fund discovered my prototype. Their representative asked for a demonstration. I almost refused. Then I remembered my own words from years ago. "If you fail, start again." So I went. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. At the end, the investor leaned back and asked, "Who owns the underlying technology?" I looked at the contract I prepared. "I do." He smiled. "Good." He slid a folder across the table. "We'd like to fund you." I stared at the number. It was more money than I had ever personally controlled. My hands trembled. Not because of the amount. Because for the first time, my future wasn't attached to Vivian's name. That evening, I walked back to my apartment carrying groceries. Mrs. Ellis was watering flowers outside the bookstore. She looked at me. "You look different." "I got funding." She smiled. "Congratulations." I laughed. "Thank you." She studied me for another moment. "Does your wife know?" My smile disappeared. "No." She nodded. "Then enjoy the moment before she does." I didn't understand what she meant. Until the next morning. My phone exploded with notifications. Hartwell Technologies had announced a major corporate restructuring. And buried beneath the headline was one sentence that made my blood run cold. Adrian Cole had been removed from his position pending an internal investigation. I read it twice. Then a third time. A message arrived from an unknown number. "Daniel, we need to talk." It's Vivian. I stared at the screen. Another message followed. I know what Adrian did. My heart began pounding. Then came the sentence I never expected to read. The algorithm wasn't his. It wasn't yours either. I stopped breathing. The next message appeared. It was stolen from you before you ever gave it to me. And suddenly, the story I thought I understood was no longer the story at all. I read Vivian's message until the words blurred. The algorithm wasn't his. It wasn't yours either. It was stolen from you before you ever gave it to me. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Daniel. What happened? A long silence followed. Can you come back? No. Her breathing changed. Then let me explain. Explain why you told me I was imagining things. I was wrong. That isn't an explanation. No, she said quietly. It isn't. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Start talking. Vivian told me that 3 months before the gala, Adrian had approached her with a prototype remarkably similar to the system I had been developing. He claimed it was his. Vivian had believed him. Not completely, but enough. She had secretly ordered an internal audit. The audit revealed something worse. Adrian had obtained the earliest version of my research from an old company server. The server had been compromised almost a year earlier. Someone had copied several private files, including my notes. Vivian had discovered the theft only after the subsidiary agreement had already been signed. Then why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because I thought I could handle it before involving you. You could handle it. Yes. You destroyed my trust while trying to protect me. I know. No, Vivian. You don't. My voice remained quiet. That seemed to hurt her more than shouting would have. She said, I thought if I confronted Adrian without proof, he would destroy the company. And you decided destroying our marriage was acceptable collateral damage. Silence. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth I'd been avoiding. Even if Adrian had lied, Vivian had still chosen not to trust me. She had still let me believe my wife considered me an inconvenience. What happens now? I asked. We're investigating everyone who had access to the server. Everyone? Yes. Does that include you? Another pause. Yes. I laughed bitterly. At least you're finally investigating yourself. I deserve that. I didn't respond. Then Vivian said something unexpected. Daniel, I need you to know something. What? I didn't answer your prank because I thought it was funny. My chest tightened. Then why? Because when I saw those words, I realized I was terrified. Of what? That you meant them. I stared at the wall. You should have been. I know. We ended the call without resolving anything. For the next few days, I tried to forget about Hartwell. My own company was growing. The investor introduced me to 2 engineers, a product designer, and a legal advisor. Their names mattered less than what happened when we sat around the same table. They listened to me. Not because I was Vivian Hart's husband. Not because I had once belonged to a powerful family. Because I knew what I was doing. I called the company North Star Systems. The name came from something my father used to say when I was a child. When you don't know where you're going, find one fixed point. My fixed point had always been Vivian. That realization frightened me. So I chose another. Myself. 3 months later, our prototype was ready. We named it Meridian. It could predict infrastructure failures before they became catastrophic, using patterns buried inside massive streams of data. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't designed for headlines. But it worked. Our first client was a regional transportation company. The second came from a hospital network. Then another. One morning, my lawyer walked into the office holding a newspaper. You're on the front page. I looked at it. There I was. Not as Vivian Hart's husband. Not as a forgotten engineer. The headline read, Unknown founder builds fast-growing predictive technology startup. I smiled. Then I saw the smaller headline beside it. Hartwell Technologies faces internal scandal after executive suspended. Adrian. The article said investigators had discovered he had copied research from multiple employees over several years. But there was another detail. He hadn't acted alone. Someone inside Hartwell had given him access. I called my lawyer. Find out who. He frowned. Why? Because I want to know how deep this goes. That night, I received an email from Vivian. There was no greeting, just an attachment. I opened it. It was a security report. One name appeared repeatedly. Eleanor Hart, Vivian's mother. I stared at the screen. Eleanor had never liked me. She had once told Vivian that marrying me was an emotional decision that could become expensive, but I had never imagined she would sabotage me. The report showed that Eleanor had authorized access to my old research files. Not directly, Through an executive assistant. I called Vivian again. She answered immediately. You saw it? Yes. I didn't know. Did you suspect her? I suspected everyone. And now I know. I leaned back. Why would your mother do this? Vivian's voice dropped. She wanted Adrian to become my successor. That made no sense. Why? Because she believes I need someone stronger beside me. I almost laughed. Adrian. No. She believed Adrian could control the company. The room went silent. Then Vivian said, and she believed you were making me weak. I looked at my hands. Suddenly, old memories returned. Family dinners where Eleanor praised Vivian's ambition but ignored everything I contributed. Board meetings where people interrupted me. The gala. The coat Adrian had given Vivian. The late nights. The cold answers. Maybe some of it had been manipulation. But one truth remained. Vivian had allowed it. She had chosen silence. She had chosen the company. And she had chosen to let me believe I mattered less. I told her, I'm sorry. She sounded surprised. For what? For not realizing sooner. You don't owe me an apology. Maybe not. I looked out the window at the city lights. But I owe myself one. She was silent. Then she asked, Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. I thought about the long nights. The failed prototypes. The tiny office. My team laughing over cheap takeout. The first contract. The feeling of seeing my own name on a company registration. Yes, I said. The word came easily. I am. Vivian didn't answer. And for the first time, I realized that my happiness hurt her more than my anger ever could. A week later, Eleanor Hart requested a meeting. I almost declined. Then I accepted. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted the truth. We met at a quiet restaurant halfway between the capital and my new city. Eleanor arrived exactly on time. She was elegant, composed, and completely unapologetic. You've done well, she said. I smiled faintly. Thank you. North Star has attracted considerable attention. I know. She folded her hands. You could return to Hartwell. I nearly laughed. Why would I? Because you're more valuable than you realize. There it was. The same language. Value. Position. Usefulness. Never love. I don't want a position at Hartwell. You could have one. I don't want one. She studied me. Vivian is miserable. I looked at her. That's not my responsibility anymore. Her expression hardened. You still love her? Yes. She seemed surprised by my honesty. But love isn't the same as returning. For the first time, Eleanor had nothing to say. I continued. Your daughter didn't lose me because of Adrian. She made mistakes. She did. She can correct them. Some things can be repaired. I paused. Trust isn't one of them. Eleanor looked away. Then she said something I hadn't expected. I never thought you would leave. I know. I thought you were too attached. I was. And now. I looked through the window. Now I'm attached to the life I built after leaving. That was the end of the meeting. But it wasn't the end of the story. 2 weeks later, Adrian was formally charged with fraud and intellectual property theft. The investigation also uncovered payments from Eleanor's private account to one of his consulting companies. She hadn't intended to destroy me. She had intended to pressure Vivian into removing me from the company's inner circle. She believed Adrian would become indispensable. Instead, she had helped create a scandal that damaged Hartwell's reputation. Vivian removed her from the board. The decision made national news. But Vivian didn't call me afterward. Neither did I call her. Months passed. North Star grew. We moved into a larger office. I hired 12 employees. I learned how to negotiate, how to say no, how to protect my ideas, how to leave meetings without feeling guilty. And, slowly, I learned how to sleep without checking my phone for Vivian's name. Then I met Maya. She was the architect we hired to redesign our platform. The first thing she said to me was, Your interface is terrible. I stared at her. She stared back. Then she smiled. I assume nobody tells you that. Not anymore. Good. We became friends before anything else. She never asked about Vivian. When she eventually learned I was still legally married, she didn't judge me. She simply said, Then figure out what you want before you ask someone else to stand beside you. That sentence stayed with me. Maya wasn't impressed by my company. She wasn't impressed by money. She liked the way I listened. The way I stayed late when the team needed me. The way I remembered people's birthdays. One evening, after everyone left, we sat on the office balcony. Maya asked, Do you still love her? I didn't lie. Yes. She nodded. Then you probably need to say goodbye properly. I think you're right. The next morning, Vivian sent me an invitation. Not to a business meeting, not to a family event, to the old diner where we had made our first promise. She wrote only one conversation. No business. No excuses. Please. I stared at the message for several minutes. Then I accepted. When I arrived that evening, Vivian was already there. She looked different. Not weaker. Just tired. She stood when she saw me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled sadly. You really did become a different man. I pulled out the chair. I think I became the man I was before I spent so much time trying to keep you. Her eyes lowered. I miss you. I swallowed. I know. I miss coming home and knowing you were there. I know. I miss your coffee. A small smile touched my face. You always said it was terrible. It was. We both laughed. For a moment, it felt like 6 years ago. Then Vivian looked at me. Daniel, if I asked you to come home. I knew the question before she finished. She whispered, would you? I looked at the woman I had once believed would be my entire future. And for the first time, I understood that loving someone didn't mean giving them another chance to break you. I don't know, I said. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. But I think I already know the answer. I didn't correct her, because she was right. I had left once. This time, I wasn't running away. I was choosing where I wanted to go. Vivian didn't ask me to come home again. That surprised me. For the next several weeks, she respected the distance I had created. No late-night calls. No unexpected visits. No messages asking me to reconsider. Instead, I heard about her through the news. Hartwell Technologies was recovering. Vivian had removed 3 executives involved in the internal scandal and rebuilt the company's security division from the ground up. She also created an employee intellectual property protection program. When a reporter asked why, she answered simply, people should never have to choose between protecting their work and protecting their careers. I watched that interview alone in my office. She had changed. I could see it. But change didn't erase history. I turned off the screen and returned to work. Northstar had just received its biggest contract yet. A national energy company wanted Meridian deployed across hundreds of facilities. The deal could transform the company. It also came with a problem. We needed a larger engineering team. Maya and I spent 2 weeks interviewing candidates. One afternoon, she dropped a resume on my desk. You need to meet this person. I looked at the name. Ethan Brooks, former senior engineer at Hartwell. I frowned. No, you haven't even read it. I know where he worked. He resigned 6 months ago. Why? Because he refused to sign off on Adrian's project. That made me look again. We interviewed him the next morning. Ethan was nervous. He admitted he had suspected Adrian was stealing research but had been afraid to speak publicly. Why come here? I asked. He looked at me. Because I heard you don't care where someone came from. I smiled. I care what they do here. He joined us 2 weeks later. The team grew. The office became louder. For the first time, I had built something that felt like a community. Then came the night that changed everything. Our largest client experienced a major system failure. Meridian had predicted it, but their existing infrastructure had ignored the warning. Within hours, several facilities shut down. News outlets blamed the technology. Our stock valuation, though still private, dropped sharply among investors. My board wanted an emergency meeting. One investor said, we need someone with corporate experience. Another suggested hiring an outside CEO. I listened. Then I stood. No. Everyone looked at me. We built this company because we believed technology could prevent failures like this. I placed the technical report on the table. Meridian worked. Our client ignored it. The room went quiet. We won't hide that fact. We will fix what we can, document what happened, and take responsibility for our part. Maya looked at me. She smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile Vivian used to give me. It wasn't proud because I had impressed someone. It was the smile of someone who trusted the person sitting beside her. We survived the crisis. More importantly, we learned from it. 6 months later, Northstar became profitable. And then the offer came. A global technology company wanted to acquire us. The amount was enormous. My board was ecstatic. I wasn't. I spent 3 nights thinking about it. On the 4th morning, I rejected the offer. Maya stared at me. You realize you just turned down enough money to retire. I know. Why? I looked around our office. Because this place wasn't just a company. It was proof that I could build something without standing behind Vivian's shadow. I don't want an exit, I said. I want a future. Maya nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. Our relationship changed after that. Slowly. No dramatic confession. No sudden kiss in the rain. Just small things. Coffee together. Long walks. Arguments about product design. Her stealing fries from my plate. My pretending to be annoyed. One evening, she asked, "When was the last time you were genuinely happy?" I thought about it. Tonight. She looked at me. Good. She didn't ask why, and that was why I trusted her. Then Vivian called. Not about the marriage. About my company. "There is something you need to know," she said. "What?" "Hartwell's board wants to partner with Northstar." I frowned. "Why?" "Because Meridian is exactly what Hartwell's infrastructure division needs." I leaned back. "Are you proposing a business partnership?" "Yes." "Would you benefit personally?" "No." "Would Hartwell?" "Yes." "Then why should I agree?" "Because it could help millions of people." I was silent. She continued. "And because I know you won't let me influence the deal." That made me laugh. "You're finally learning." "I've been learning for a while." We ended the call. The next morning, I told my board we would consider the proposal. Not because it was Vivian, because it was good business. But the partnership had one condition. I would negotiate directly with Hartwell's new executive team. Vivian would have no authority over the agreement. She accepted immediately. The negotiations lasted 3 months. During that time, Vivian and I saw each other several times. Always professionally. Always politely. And strangely, that was harder than fighting. There was no anger left. Only history. One afternoon, after a meeting, Vivian stopped me outside the conference room. "Daniel." I turned. "What?" She hesitated. "I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "You were right." I smiled faintly. "About what?" "About leaving." My expression changed. She looked at the floor. "When you left, I thought you were punishing me." "You weren't." "I know that now." She looked back at me. "You saved yourself." I said nothing. I wish I had understood sooner. Then she walked away. For some reason, that hurt more than her anger ever had. The partnership was finalized in late autumn. Northstar gained access to Hartwell's international infrastructure network. Hartwell gained Meridian's predictive technology. Both companies benefited. And for the first time, my name appeared beside Vivian's in a business announcement without anyone calling me her husband. I was Daniel Reed, founder and CEO of Northstar Systems. She was Vivian Hart, CEO of Hartwell Technologies. 2 separate people. 2 separate companies. 2 separate lives. That should have been the end of our story. It wasn't. Because one evening, I received an envelope at my office. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. From Vivian. I almost threw it away. Instead, I read it. She wrote about our first apartment. Our first Christmas. The night she got her first major investor. The time I stayed awake for 36 hours because she was preparing for a product launch. She remembered things I had forgotten. At the end, she wrote, "I spent years believing that loving you meant making sure you stayed beside me. I didn't understand that love also means respecting the moment someone needs to walk away." I stopped reading. I couldn't continue. Maya found me sitting alone. "Bad news." "No." I folded the letter. "Old news." She sat beside me. "Do you want to talk?" "Not yet." She nodded. That was all. A week later, I asked Maya to dinner. Not as my employee, not as my friend, as a man asking a woman for a chance. She accepted. Our first date was terrible. The restaurant lost our reservation. We waited 40 minutes. Then the waiter spilled water on my jacket. Maya laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. I stared at her. "What? You're enjoying this?" "Very much." I smiled. "I think I like you. I was wondering when you'd figure that out." We laughed. And something inside me finally became quiet. But happiness has a strange habit of making the past knock louder. 3 months into our relationship, Vivian asked to meet me. This time, she didn't mention business. She wanted to finalize the divorce. I agreed. We met at a lawyer's office. The paperwork took 20 minutes. 6 years reduced to signatures. Vivian held the pen for a long time. Then she signed. I did the same. When we stood, she looked at me. "Are you happy?" "Yes." She nodded. "With her?" I knew she meant Maya. "Yes." There was pain in Vivian's eyes. But she didn't ask me to choose. That was the difference. She had finally learned how to love me without holding me. "I hope she knows what she has," Vivian said. "She does." "Good." We walked outside. It was raining. Vivian stood beneath the awning. I remembered another rainy day. Our second anniversary. She had forgotten the reservation. I had pretended not to care. She bought me a cheap umbrella from a street vendor. The umbrella broke before we reached the car. We had laughed until our clothes were soaked. I looked at her now. Vivian. Yes. I don't regret loving you. Her eyes filled. But I don't want to go back. She nodded slowly. I know. I hope one day you don't regret loving me either. She smiled through her tears. I never will. Then we parted. No screaming. No dramatic promises. Just two people who had once been everything to each other, finally accepting that love could be real and still not be enough to make a marriage survive. I thought that was the closure I needed. Then, 6 months later, Vivian collapsed during a board meeting. The news reached me through Maya. I froze. Is she okay? They say she's stable. I stared at my phone. Every instinct told me to go, but I didn't know whether that would help her or reopen wounds. Maya touched my arm. You still care? Yes. Then go. I looked at her. Are you sure? She smiled. Daniel, caring about someone isn't betrayal. I went to the hospital. Vivian was awake when I entered. She looked surprised. You came? Of course. She smiled faintly. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I thought you wouldn't. I almost didn't. Why? Because I was afraid I was coming for the wrong reason. And now, I pulled a chair beside her bed. Now I know I'm here because you're someone I once loved. She looked at me. Once. I smiled sadly. Some kinds of love don't disappear. They just change shape. She turned her face toward the window. After a moment, she said, Maya is a good woman. She is. Don't hurt her. I laughed softly. I'll try. Vivian smiled. Then her expression became serious. Daniel, there's one more thing. What? The night you posted single again. She paused. I was going to tell you I was pregnant. The room went completely silent. My heart stopped. Vivian looked at me. I lost the baby 2 days later. I couldn't speak. She lowered her eyes. And I never told you. I stared at her, unable to process the words. The prank. The messages. The anger. The silence. All of it suddenly felt painfully small. Why? I whispered. Because I thought if I told you, you'd stay out of guilt. My eyes burned. She reached for my hand. I let her hold it. For the first time since I had left, neither of us was trying to win. We were simply two people mourning something we had never been given the chance to know. And as I sat beside her hospital bed, I realized the past wasn't finished with us yet. But this time, I wasn't afraid of it. I stayed beside Vivian until dawn. Neither of us talked much. There was nothing useful to say. Some pain didn't need explanations. It only needed someone willing to remain in the room. When the first light came through the hospital window, Vivian finally whispered, You should go home. I looked at her. I know. She smiled weakly. You have someone waiting for you. Maya knows I'm here. She'll understand. I know. I stood. For a second, Vivian caught my sleeve. Daniel. I turned. Thank you. I nodded. Then I left. Outside the hospital, I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes without starting the engine. I thought about the child we had lost. About all the conversations we had never had. About how easily two people could hurt each other while believing they were protecting themselves. When I finally drove home, Maya was waiting on the balcony. She didn't ask questions. She simply opened her arms. I held her. And for the first time, I cried. Not for Vivian. Not for the marriage. For everything we had once imagined our lives would become. Maya held me until the sun rose. Then she said quietly, You don't have to choose between compassion and moving forward. I closed my eyes. I know. But knowing something and believing it were different. For the next month, I visited Vivian twice. Never alone for too long. Never secretly. Never pretending we were still married. We talked about ordinary things. Her recovery. North Star. Books. Old restaurants. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we sat in silence. The strange thing was that our conversations became easier after the divorce. There was no expectation anymore. No obligation. No fear of disappointing each other. One afternoon, Vivian asked me, Do you remember our first Christmas? Which one? The first one after we got married. I smiled. You bought me a watch. You hated it. I loved it. You never wore it. Because it was expensive. She laughed. Then her expression softened. I used to think you were afraid of success. I wasn't. I know. She looked at me. You were afraid of becoming someone you didn't recognize. I nodded. Maybe. She looked down at her hands. I think I became that person. You're changing. Because you left. No. I shook my head. You changed because you finally had to face yourself. She smiled. That sounds like something Maya would say. She says smarter things than I do. I believed that. For the first time, there was no jealousy in her voice. Only acceptance. Meanwhile, North Star entered another phase of growth. We expanded into 3 countries. Meridian became one of the most trusted predictive systems in our industry. And the technology that had once been stolen from me became something far larger than the original invention. We released an open research framework for universities and independent engineers. That decision surprised investors. One asked me, "Why give away technology that could make you richer?" I answered, "Because I spent too long believing that protecting something meant locking it away." The framework was adopted by dozens of universities. Young engineers began improving Meridian in ways my original team had never imagined. That was when I finally understood the difference between ownership and purpose. I had spent years wanting someone to acknowledge that the algorithm was mine. Now I cared more about what it could become. My father had been right. A fixed point wasn't a destination. It was something that helped you navigate. My fixed point had changed. It wasn't Vivian. It wasn't North Star. It was the kind of man I wanted to be. Then, just when life seemed peaceful, a problem surfaced. Hartwell's board discovered that Eleanor had hidden another financial arrangement. Money had been moved through several shell companies before Adrian's scandal. Some of it had been used to influence executives. Some had funded competitors. And one payment was connected to the theft of my original research. Vivian called me. "They found everything." I sighed. "I'm sorry. I need you to testify." I went silent. "Daniel, you don't have to do it." "What would happen if I don't?" Eleanor could avoid the full consequences. I looked out the window. I didn't want revenge. But justice wasn't revenge. "Send me the documents." The hearing took place 3 weeks later. Eleanor sat across the room. For the first time, she looked old. Not powerful. Not intimidating. Just tired. When I was asked whether I believed she had deliberately harmed me, I answered honestly, "Yes." The lawyer asked, "Do you want the court to punish her?" I paused. "I want the truth recorded." That was all. Eleanor was eventually removed from several corporate positions and faced financial penalties connected to the misconduct. She lost influence. But I didn't celebrate. There was nothing satisfying about watching an old woman's life collapse. I simply wanted the chapter closed. After the hearing, she approached me. "I was wrong about you." I looked at her. "Yes. I thought you would always depend on Vivian. I depended on her too much. You loved her. I still care about her." Eleanor nodded. "I think that's what I never understood." "What?" "That love can exist without possession." I didn't answer. She walked away. And that was the last time I saw her. A year after I left Vivian, North Star celebrated its 3rd anniversary. The entire team gathered in our new headquarters. There were speeches, music, and too much food. Maya gave the final speech. She stood on stage and looked at me. When Daniel founded this company, he didn't have a giant office or a famous name. The team laughed. He had a laptop, an unfinished prototype, and an unreasonable belief that he could build something better. More laughter. Maya continued. But what impressed me wasn't the technology. She looked directly at me. It was that he kept building after losing almost everything. The room became quiet. I felt my throat tighten. She raised her glass. "To building something that belongs to you." Everyone applauded. I smiled. Afterward, Maya found me outside. "You hated that speech." "I loved it." "You're a terrible liar." I laughed. Then she became serious. "Daniel." "Yes. I've been offered a position in London." I stared at her. "When?" "Last week." "Do you want it?" "I don't know." That was the first time fear entered our relationship. Not because she wanted to leave me. Because I understood what it meant to love someone without controlling their choices. "If you want to go," I said, "you should." She searched my face. "You'd really say that?" "Yes." "Even if it means we have to do long distance?" "Yes." She smiled. "That's different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" "That you'd ask me to stay." I shook my head. I spent too many years believing love meant keeping someone close. She stepped toward me. "And now I think love means letting someone become more." She kissed me. It was a simple kiss. No fireworks. No dramatic music. Just warmth. When we pulled apart, she whispered, "I'm not sure I want London." "Why?" "Because I think my future is here." My heart raced. "Are you sure?" "No." She smiled. "But I'm willing to find out." We didn't rush anything. That was the difference between my old marriage and my new relationship. There was no pressure to define every emotion immediately. We simply kept choosing each other. Months later, Maya and I moved into a small house near the coast. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't designed to impress anyone. There were plants on the windowsill, books everywhere, and a kitchen table that was always covered in papers. I loved it. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I thought about the man who had posted single again as a joke. He had wanted one reaction from his wife. A little jealousy, a little fear, proof that he still mattered. Instead, he accidentally revealed the truth. He mattered, but he had forgotten that he also mattered to himself. One Sunday morning, my phone rang. Vivian. I answered. Hello. Hi. Her voice sounded calm. I wanted to tell you something. What? I've started seeing someone. I smiled. Really? Yes. Do I know him? No. Is he good to you? He is. Then I'm happy for you. There was a pause. You sound like you mean that. I do. I think I'm finally learning how to live without measuring everything by what I lost. I leaned back. That's good. And Daniel? Yes. I think we're finally okay. I smiled. I think we are. She laughed softly. Then she said goodbye. I placed the phone on the table. Maya looked at me. Vivian. Yes. How is she? Happy. Maya smiled. Good. That evening, I received an invitation. Hartwell was hosting a charity foundation dinner. The foundation had been created in memory of employees affected by workplace exploitation and intellectual property theft. Vivian wanted me to attend. I almost refused. Then I decided to go. Not because I wanted to see her. Because the foundation represented something important. A lesson we had both learned too late. The ballroom was full when I arrived. People recognized me now. Some approached to discuss North Star. Others asked about Meridian. Nobody introduced me as Vivian Hart's husband. That small detail meant more than they knew. Then I saw Vivian across the room. She smiled. I smiled back. We didn't approach each other immediately. There was no need. Later, when the speeches ended, we stood together near the balcony. She looked at the city. Do you ever think about that night? The prank. Yes. I laughed. Sometimes. I thought you were trying to make me jealous. I was. You succeeded. Really? She smiled. Completely. We both laughed. Then she became quiet. If you could go back. I interrupted gently. No. She looked at me. Not even once. No. Why? Because if I hadn't left, I wouldn't have found myself. She nodded. I think that's the answer I needed. We stood there for a while. Then Vivian said, I'm glad you announced you were single. I laughed. That may be the first time anyone has ever said that. She smiled. It hurt. I know. But it forced me to see what I was losing. I looked at her. And what did you lose? She thought for a moment. My husband. Then she smiled sadly. And eventually, I learned that losing you didn't mean losing the good parts of our story. I nodded. That matters. We said goodbye that night. No promise to return. No hidden longing. Just gratitude. As I walked toward the exit, I realized something. I had once believed the strongest ending would be Vivian begging me to come back. It wasn't. The strongest ending was walking away from her without hatred, and knowing I no longer needed her regret to prove that I had been worth loving. The following year changed everything. North Star went public. I stood on a stage surrounded by cameras, investors, employees, and people who had once never heard my name. The opening bell sounded. Everyone applauded. I smiled, but my mind went somewhere else. Back to that tiny apartment above Mrs. Ellis's bookstore. Back to the nights when I had no idea whether North Star would survive. Back to the laptop with a broken hinge. Back to the man who had believed his life was over because his wife no longer needed him. I realized then that success had never been about proving Vivian wrong. It had been about proving myself right. I had always been capable of building something. I had simply forgotten. After the ceremony, journalists surrounded me. One asked, Your former wife is also a major technology executive. Did your marriage influence your success? I smiled. My marriage influenced who I became. My success is my responsibility. Another reporter asked, Do you still speak to her? Yes. Are you friends? I thought about it. We're people who once loved each other very deeply. That answer made the next day's headlines. But I didn't regret it. A week later, Vivian called. You made the news. So did you. Apparently we're still interesting together. I laughed. Unfortunately. She was quiet. Then she said, I'm proud of you. I closed my eyes. Those words would have once meant everything. Now they meant something different. Thank you. I mean it. I know. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever miss us? I didn't answer immediately. Yes. She exhaled. Me too. But I don't miss being us. Silence. Then she said, I understand. That was the last difficult conversation we ever had. After that, our lives became separate in a peaceful way. Vivian continued rebuilding Hartwell. She became known for a different kind of leadership. She stopped demanding loyalty and started building trust. She funded scholarships for young engineers from poor families. She created an internal program where employees could report intellectual property theft without fear. I heard about these things through the industry. Sometimes I smiled. Not because I wanted credit, because I knew she had changed. And sometimes people asked me whether I forgave her. My answer was always the same. Forgiveness isn't permission to return. That sentence became something I repeated often. Not because it sounded wise, because I had learned it the hard way. Meanwhile, Maya and I built a quiet life outside the company. We traveled when we could. We argued about furniture. She hated my taste in curtains. I hated her obsession with rearranging books. We cooked badly. We laughed often. One night, while we were eating dinner, she placed something beside my plate. A small envelope. What is this? Open it. Inside was a photograph. A house. Not our house. A new house overlooking the sea. I looked at her. What is this? Our next home. I stared. You bought a house? Not yet. She smiled. I wanted to ask you first. I laughed. You're asking me to move? No. She leaned forward. I'm asking you to build something with me. That sentence hit me harder than she knew. Because once, years earlier, someone had asked me to build a life with them. I had said yes without understanding what it meant. This time, I understood. Yes, I said. Maya smiled. Good. We bought the house 3 months later. It wasn't enormous, but it had a garden, a wide kitchen, a small office for me, a studio for Maya, and windows that faced the ocean. For the first time, I understood what home meant. Not a place where someone expected you to return. A place where you were free to stay. Then came an unexpected letter. From Mrs. Ellis. She had sold the bookstore and moved closer to her daughter. Inside the letter was a photograph of me standing outside the bookstore on the day North Star received its first funding. On the back, she had written, You looked scared. I knew you'd be fine. I laughed when I read it. Maya asked what was funny. I handed her the photo. She knew before I did. Maya smiled. She sounds wise. She was. That evening, I called Mrs. Ellis. We talked for nearly an hour. Before hanging up, she said, Daniel? Yes. Do you still think about that woman? I smiled. Sometimes. Do you wish things had been different? I looked at the ocean. No. She laughed. Good. Why? Because regret is heavy. Gratitude is lighter. I never forgot that. Years earlier, I had thought my greatest pain was losing Vivian. Now I understood. My greatest pain had been losing myself while trying to keep her. And my greatest victory wasn't North Star. It wasn't money. It wasn't fame. It was waking up one morning and realizing I didn't need to check whether Vivian Hart still wanted me. I already knew who I was. 2 years after our divorce, I received another invitation from Hartwell. This one was different. Vivian was stepping down as CEO. She wasn't retiring. She was moving into a board position and handing daily leadership to a younger executive. The announcement surprised the industry. At the farewell ceremony, Vivian said, "A company should never depend on one person." I smiled when I heard it. She had finally learned the lesson I had spent years learning. Nothing should depend entirely on one person. Not a company. Not a marriage. Not a life. After the ceremony, she asked me to meet her privately. We sat in a quiet garden behind the building. "You look happy," she said. "I am." "Good." She looked older. Not in a bad way. Just more peaceful. I used to think success meant becoming impossible to replace. She smiled. "Now I think success means building something that survives without you." That sounds like wisdom. It sounds like exhaustion. I laughed. Then she said, "I'm leaving the city." "Where?" "Somewhere quiet." "Another company?" "No." She looked toward the trees. "I want to teach." I was surprised. "Teach?" "Leadership, ethics, technology." "That sounds like you." She smiled. "Maybe it finally does." I looked at her. "You'll be good at it." "Thank you." We sat in silence. Then Vivian reached into her bag. She pulled out a small wooden box. My old wedding ring was inside. I stared at it. "You kept it." I couldn't throw it away. I looked at the ring. It was scratched now. The gold wasn't as bright. Time had left its mark. Vivian said, "I thought you might want it." I shook my head. No. Her expression fell slightly. Why? Because it belongs to the past. She nodded. I thought you'd say that. She closed the box. Then I reached into my pocket. I had something for her too. A photograph. It was from our first apartment. We were standing in front of a cheap Christmas tree. She was laughing. I was holding a broken ornament. She looked at it for a long time. I forgot this. I didn't. She smiled through tears. Keep it. You should. She hugged me. It was the first time we'd hugged since the divorce. There was no romance in it. No desire to return. Only gratitude. When we separated, Vivian whispered, "Goodbye, Daniel." I smiled. "Goodbye, Vivian." I walked away. And this time, neither of us looked back. Maya was waiting outside. How did it go? I slipped my hand into hers. Good. She squeezed my fingers. Ready to go home? I looked toward the road. Then toward her. Yes. We drove home that evening with the windows open. The sea air filled the car. Maya turned the music up. I laughed. What? You always drive too slowly. You always complain. Because you're 80 years old. I am 39. Emotionally, 80. I laughed harder. It was ordinary. And somehow, ordinary felt extraordinary. When we reached home, I walked into the garden. The sunset was spreading across the water. Maya stood beside me. She rested her head against my shoulder. Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you hadn't made that prank? I smiled. All the time. What would you have done? Probably apologized. And gone home. Maybe. She looked at me. Would that have been so bad? I thought about it. No. Then I shook my head. But it wouldn't have been my life. She understood. We stood quietly. I remembered the night I had posted those 2 words. Single again. I had wanted Vivian to panic. Instead, I had panicked myself into the truth. Sometimes life doesn't break us in the way we expect. Sometimes it breaks the cage we didn't realize we were living inside. I once believed the woman I loved was my entire world. Then I lost her. And in losing her, I discovered a world I had never bothered to explore. A world where my work had value. Where my voice mattered. Where love didn't require fear. Where loyalty wasn't measured by how much pain I could tolerate. And where being needed was never the same thing as being loved. Maya turned toward me. What are you thinking? I smiled. That I'm lucky. She raised an eyebrow. Because of me? Mostly. She laughed. Good answer. I kissed her forehead. Then we walked inside together. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I made coffee, opened my laptop, checked the latest North Star reports. Then I closed everything. For once, there was nothing I needed to prove. I walked outside. Maya was sitting on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw me. I sat beside her. The ocean stretched endlessly in front of us. And I finally understood the simplest truth of my entire life. I had spent years trying to make someone else choose me. Then I left and learned how to choose myself. That was the day I stopped measuring my life by who had stayed. I measured it by what I had built after they left. And for the first time, I didn't need anyone to tell me I was enough. I already knew. 3 years passed before I heard Vivian's name outside a business headline. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was reviewing a proposal when Maya walked into my office holding her phone. You should see this. I looked up. What? She placed the phone on my desk. The headline read, Hartwell founder launches new foundation for ethical technology. Beneath it was Vivian's photograph. I read the article. After stepping away from daily leadership, Vivian had created a foundation that funded young engineers whose inventions had been exploited by larger companies. The first major grant was going to a university student whose research had been taken by his employer. I smiled. Maya watched me. You're proud of her? Yes. That's okay. I know. I closed the article. What about you? What about me? You're still going to pretend you're not proud of yourself? I laughed. I'm trying. She sat across from me. You know what I think? That you're always right? Obviously. I smiled. I think you spent years waiting for someone else to recognize your value. I looked at her. And now you're the person recognizing it. I thought about that. She was right. The strangest part of healing was that it didn't happen all at once. There was no morning when I woke up and suddenly forgot the pain. It disappeared in pieces. A memory stopped hurting. A photograph became just a photograph. A familiar restaurant became just a restaurant. A name became just a name. Until one day, I realized I could remember Vivian without wishing to change the past. That was freedom, not forgetting, accepting. A month later, North Star opened a research center. I invited university students, independent engineers, and young founders. During the opening, a 17-year-old student approached me. Mr. Reed, yes. Can I ask you something? Of course. Were you really betrayed by your wife? I almost laughed. Apparently, even teenagers knew the story. That's one way to describe it. Then how did you become successful afterward? I looked at him. I didn't become successful because I was betrayed. He waited. I became successful because after the betrayal, I finally stopped spending all my energy trying to make someone understand my worth. The student nodded slowly. So what did you do? I started building. He smiled. That's it. That was enough. Later that evening, after everyone left, I stood alone inside the new research center. The walls were covered with ideas from young engineers. Some were brilliant. Some were terrible. All of them were alive with possibility. I thought about the algorithm that had started everything. The original files were long gone, but its purpose had survived. That was the real twist of my life. The thing I once thought had been stolen from me had become the foundation of everything I built. I hadn't lost my future. I had simply lost the version of it I thought I wanted. Maya found me in the hallway. You're doing the staring thing again. What staring thing? The one where you disappear into your head. I smiled. I was thinking about the old algorithm. She slipped her hand into mine. Still important? Yes. But not because it's yours. I looked at the students' projects. No. Then why? Because it taught me that an idea can survive its creator. Maya smiled. And people can survive their past. I squeezed her hand. Exactly. That night, I received a message from Vivian. Congratulations on the research center. I replied, thank you. Then another message came. I'm glad you're using what happened to help other people. I stared at the screen, then typed, I'm glad you are too. She sent one final message. Take care, Daniel. I smiled. You too. That was it. No hidden meaning. No unfinished conversation. Just two people who had finally reached the end of a long road. But there was one final thing I had never done. I had never returned to the old house. The house where our marriage had ended. The house where I had slept in the guest room. The house where I had packed my suitcase. A few months later, the property went on the market. I drove there alone. The house looked smaller than I remembered. I stood outside for several minutes. Then I walked through the front door. Every room held a memory. The kitchen where Vivian had forgotten our anniversary. The hallway where we had argued. The guest room where I had decided to leave. The staircase where she had once fallen asleep waiting for me. I stood in the bedroom. For a moment, I could almost hear our younger voices. Then the feeling passed. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply understood. This house had once been my whole world. Now it was just a house. I walked outside, and I closed the gate behind me. That evening, I returned home to Maya. She was in the kitchen, wearing one of my old shirts. What took you so long? I went somewhere. Where? The old house. She stopped chopping vegetables. How was it? I thought about the question. Small. She smiled. That's all. No. I sat at the table. It was full of ghosts. Bad ones. Not anymore. She came around the counter and sat beside me. I took her hand. Thank you. For what? For never asking me to forget. She looked confused. I never wanted you to forget. I know. You're allowed to have a past. I smiled. And you're my present. She squeezed my hand. Good. I looked around the kitchen. At the imperfect furniture. The half-finished books. The plants Maya kept forgetting to water. The photographs on the wall. Our life. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Just ours. A year later, we got married. We didn't have a huge ceremony. No celebrities. No executives. No cameras. Just family, close friends, and a small garden beside the ocean. Before the ceremony began, Maya asked me, Are you nervous? Yes. Why? Because this time I know exactly what I'm promising. She smiled. What are you promising? I looked at her. Not that I'll never fail you. She waited. Not that I'll always know what to do. I took her hand. I'm promising that I'll never stop seeing you as your own person. Her eyes filled with tears. And I'll never ask you to disappear so I can feel secure. We said our vows. Simple ones. Honest ones. When it was over, everyone applauded. I looked toward the ocean. The sunset reminded me of another evening years earlier. I had been standing on a balcony after my divorce, convinced that the hardest part of my life was over. I had been wrong. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was learning not to carry the old life into the new one. I had carried anger, guilt, nostalgia, fear. For a long time, I thought healing meant removing those feelings. It didn't. It meant learning where to put them. Some belonged in memories. Some belonged in lessons. Some belonged in forgiveness. And none of them belonged in my future. Years later, when people asked me about the famous single again post, I always laughed. They expected a dramatic story. They expected me to say I planned everything. I didn't. It was a prank. A stupid, emotional, desperate prank from a man who wanted his wife to prove she still cared. Instead, her response changed the course of both our lives. Try again, husband. At the time, I thought she meant, come back. Now I understand she meant something else. Try again. Not with me. With yourself. Try again at becoming the person you buried beneath someone else's expectations. Try again at trusting your own abilities. Try again at building a life that doesn't collapse when someone walks away. Try again at loving without losing yourself. Vivian and I never became enemies. That mattered to me. She was part of my story. A painful part. A beautiful part. A complicated part. But a finished part. Sometimes people believe closure requires an apology. Sometimes it requires revenge. Sometimes it requires watching the person who hurt you suffer. I learned that none of those things are necessary. Closure came when I could hear Vivian's name and feel gratitude instead of anger. Gratitude for what we shared. Gratitude for what I learned. Gratitude for the person I became afterward. And most importantly, gratitude that I finally understood something I should have known from the beginning. Love is not supposed to make you smaller. Marriage is not supposed to erase individuality. Loyalty is not measured by how much betrayal you can survive. And walking away isn't always giving up. Sometimes walking away is the first honest decision you've made in years. I once announced that I was single as a prank. I thought the worst thing that could happen was that my wife wouldn't react the way I wanted. Instead, she reacted exactly as she should have. She forced me to face the truth. I was already lonely inside my marriage. I was already living like someone whose life belonged to another person. And when I finally walked away, I discovered that being alone wasn't the same as being abandoned. There was a world waiting for me. A company. A dream. Friends. A woman who loved me without needing to own me. A home by the ocean. A purpose bigger than my wounded pride. And peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from winning. The kind that comes from no longer needing to win. Sometimes, late at night, I still remember that notification. Try again, husband. I smile. Then I look beside me. Maya is usually asleep. The house is quiet. The ocean is somewhere beyond the windows. And I think about the man I used to be. He wanted someone else to tell him he was worth choosing. I don't need that anymore. Because I chose myself. And then, finally, I was able to choose someone else without losing who I was. That was the real beginning. Not the day I became single. Not the day North Star became successful. Not the day Vivian regretted losing me. The real beginning was the day I stopped asking, why wasn't I enough for her? And started asking, what kind of life is enough for me? I found my answer. And I built it. One quiet decision at a time.